Hello, everyone, and welcome to the July edition of the French Cinémathèque, a collaboration between the Federation of Alliance Française USA and Telescope Film. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Justine Barda, and I'm the founder and CEO of Telescope Film, a website for international film and TV. We offer a database of over 500,000 international films and series with links to where to watch them in the US. We also have a dedicated page on the site for French film and TV with information about what's new and what's popular from France, as well as curated selections. We are thrilled to be collaborating with Alliance Française USA, the largest Alliance Française network in the world, helping 25,000 learners of French each year learn French, live French, and love French. Here's a little video about them. So we'll put links to more information about both AFUSA and Telescope Film in the chat. The French Cinémathèque takes place the fourth Monday of every month. Next month, we'll be talking about the film Summer of '85, directed by François Ozon. We're also going to recommend pairing this feature with one of Ozon's short films, A Summer Dress. Before we get started, tonight, though, a couple of brief housekeeping notes. Please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking and stay on speaker view. To ask a question, we ask that you raise your hand using the Zoom feature at the bottom of the screen. It's in the reactions section, or you're also welcome to put your question in the chat. If there are technical issues, you may wish to leave the Zoom, then sign back in a couple of minutes using the original Zoom link. And this event is being recorded for our YouTube channels, and the total runtime is 1 hour. And with that, I'd like to introduce our new facilitator. So for those of you who've joined us in the past 6 months, we have had to say goodbye to our previous facilitator, Olga, who's returning to France. But we are delighted to welcome Peter Debruge. Peter is the chief film critic for Variety, where he has worked since 2005. He has also written for Premiere, Life, Creative Screenwriting, IndieWire, and the Miami Herald. In 2017, he co-founded the Animationist Film Festival in Los Angeles and has also been a member of juries at the South by Southwest, Reykjavik, Molodist, Cocoa, Annecy, and Cannes film festivals. So bienvenue, Peter, and I'll hand things over to you.
The Molodist Film Festival, I didn't remember that being part of my bio, but it's relevant. I don't know how many of you know, but the Molodist Film Festival happens in Kiev, and that, of course, was a chance just before the invasion by Russia. Maybe 7 months earlier, I had a chance to see Kyiv, and what a devastating comparison it is to realize just how much has been destroyed. I'm really looking forward to sort of stepping in as your facilitator for this series. I'm the chief film critic of Variety magazine, of course. That means I'm fortunate enough to share my opinions and my expertise about movies for a living. But that doesn't mean that my opinion is the right one, and certainly not the only one. I think film criticism is a conversation. And today I really want to hear what you think. So it's really, my pleasure. My role here is to steer the discussion more than to monologue or to dominate it. This film, what I will do is, set a little bit of context for the film, which we've all watched over the weekend or in the lead up here. But I just want to make sure, in case you went in cold, you have a little bit of background. This was a first film featured at the Cannes Film Festival in their Critics Week section in 2021. That's a sidebar of the Cannes Film Festival dedicated to first and second films. And the director, Élie Gropp, is French. But of course, the movie feels like it's kind of a hybrid of different nationalities. Just like its lead actor is Ukrainian, it takes place in Switzerland. And it was submitted by Switzerland to represent the country in the Academy Awards. Every year, each country picks a film. Switzerland has not had one of those films be nominated in more than 30 years. It was way back in 1990 with Journey of Hope when they were last nominated. But this was a really special movie, and of course made all the more so because it's set in 2013, but it took on new relevance between its making and its release because of the Russian invasion. France has fared slightly better in the Academy Awards if you've been paying attention. Last year, of course, Anatomy of a Fall was nominated for Best Picture. In the last 10 years, the movies Mustang and Les Miserables were nominated. But this is, this filmmaker, Elie Gropp, made a series of short films beforehand. And apparently his training is in music. He also attended film school, but he studied more to be a musician, and his early short films are about that. They're documentaries about singers, professional singers, and he made a documentary called Or Sen. I'm going to read just a couple sentences in which Elie describes how a woman he met while making Or Sen inspired this film. He says, in late 2015, I co-directed a documentary about an orchestra. I filmed a Ukrainian violinist who had arrived in Switzerland right before Euromaidan. I was deeply touched by her confusion as she was telling me about the revolution and the impact the images had had on her. So, inspired by this actual woman, and he sort of extrapolated that same experience, that kind of liminal quality of sort of having a foot in two different countries, but not really feeling properly connected to either of them, into this film. Okay, that's as much monologuing as you'll get from me in this. I really want to sort of turn it over to you. I think I'd like to start, since this is a chance for me to get to know the group here, with kind of a personal question, especially since to be interested in the Alliance Française and French cinema, I suspect you all have connections to multiple cultures yourselves. To me, the question is, watching a film like this, how many of you can relate to being separated from your own cultural roots? You know, that kind of experience that we see Olga do here brings all sorts of dimensions that certainly resonated for me as someone who lived for a few years in France. I suspect it's true for you too. And I kind of want to hear what it awakened in your own memories, or where your lives might have reflected, before we get into the sort of more Ukraine political dimensions, which I'm sure we'll all want to talk about as well. Let's see. If anyone wants to raise their hand, let's see. I see, is that Sharif and Zainab there? How does it work? Go ahead and tell us your experience. Okay, you're still on mute.
I think you're muted.
The question, of course, while they're figuring that out, can relate from everything from the language barriers we see here to the choice that's really central to Olga of which kind of identity, her Swiss father or her Ukrainian mother and friends, that she really identifies with. Go ahead, if you're unmuted.
Well, we are originally from Egypt and moved to the United States 14 years ago. After retirement. So our experience will not be compared with that of Olga, of course. But as you said, until now, the first thing I do in the morning is to read news about Egypt.
Sure.
So although we do not intend to return back to Egypt at our age, but we feel that we are still attached to it. And especially referring to this movie, the demonstrations in the movie happens in a place called the Midan. And the Midan is a reference to the Tahrir Square, Midan Tahrir in Egypt in 2011. And we were there. We watched that live happening. So it's not, of course, if we have moved here while we are 9 years old or 10 years old, so perhaps it would have been different, but in our case, this is the case.
I'm really glad to have you here and to hear that story. I mean, it really is. You're not 15. You don't have the stakes are not the same. You know, she clearly everything that she cares about as a human being is sports, to the point that you know, she makes the move for that reason. But specifically that idea of kind of like being in a different country and looking back at upheaval, the Arab Spring in the case of you know, Egypt, but the Euromaidan, the sort of European version of Maidan that you described, you know, creates a similar feeling, I suspect, where people you know are still there. You're concerned for them. You're relieved to be separate, but you know, it's really Maureen, if you want to jump in and add on. I'd love to hear your, did you mean to raise your hand?
I'll let you finish your thought. I have a sort of a similar experience, but please continue.
No, please go ahead. We're kind of rolling the conversation as it comes.
Okay. Well, not too far away, but believe it or not, in Canada, when I grew up in Montreal in the 70s, there was a huge upheaval with the French Canadians. And Charles de Gaulle kind of incited it unknowingly when he said, "Vive le Québec, vive l'indépendance." And he wanted the separatists. He felt that French Canadians, because they were a major part of Montreal, but it was predominantly English. And in 1974, I was still a teenager, but it made the headlines. They kidnapped the labor minister, Pierre Laporte, put him in a trunk and murdered him. And a lot of, especially the Jewish population, English speakers who had built their businesses, created roots, had to leave out of their own safety, and a lot of them moved to Toronto. And for a long time, the premier of Quebec, who was also a separatist, Pierre Levesque, ruled for a number of years. So there was a lot of, you know, it was sad because we considered us bilingual. There was a lot of unity between the French and between the French Canadians and the English, and there was extreme separatism. And unfortunately, we all had to leave because the French party basically took over. And a lot of families were separated because of that. So not that far, you know, pretty close to the border. During the period of that, the 1970s was a very tumultuous time between the French Canadian and the English.
What I'm kind of hearing in your story, Maureen, is like an identification with maybe the premise of the film, the idea that sort of a life that seems to be going normally with your own priorities is sort of torn up or turned upside down by the political circumstances. And you know, then wherever you find yourself afterwards, there's this kind of reinvention, this dissociation, and probably a hole left by what you know, what was interrupted and left behind. These things I think we all feel while watching Olga, in a way. Does anyone else want to share a personal connection to this idea of it doesn't have to involve conflict? It could just be, you know, what it's like maybe as a young person having lived in a new country where you don't understand the language yet, or you know, you feel a bit of an outsider. Go ahead, Sylvia.
Yes, I did. I kind of, when I heard Olga, having this conversation with her mother and saying, you know, the mother was saying, "How are you doing?" And she said, "I'm doing well, but I don't understand what they are saying." And I have exactly the same problem. Well, I don't know where my camera went, but anyway, I had the same problem when I started to work here in the United States. All my coworkers were talking about, you know, stuff, and which has a cultural also. There were cultural meaning also to those things. And I was very annoyed because, you know, I couldn't understand the whole thing. And I came back to my sister's house and said, you know, there's a problem. I don't understand what they're saying. And they said, and she said, "Oh, well, don't worry. When you understand, you realize that it was not so interesting to begin with."
I remember when I moved to France, I wasn't yet fluent, and there would be this effect. You would take the subway and people would be speaking around you, but your brain isn't, you know, to the point yet where you can kind of eavesdrop, and in a way it's a really surreal feeling. Like, you know, you can get this just by traveling. You don't have to move somewhere, being in a country where you don't speak the language, where you're there with your thoughts instead of, you know, kind of being part of the sort of atmosphere around you. Lee, would you like to share with us? You're muted, so you'll need to turn on your microphone.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I worked as an au pair twice in France when I was in college, and once for a summer, once for a year. And I had this experience that was so pronounced. I was out on a date with this French guy, and we ended up in a bar, and there was a piano player playing these old French standards, and everybody got extremely nostalgic. And in fact, we were asked to join another table, and it was a circular booth, and they had their arms around each other, and they're rocking back and forth. And even if I could make out the words, I certainly could not make out the social context.
Right.
Or join in the deep felt sentiment in which they were singing.
Yeah.
So that's my experience.
Yeah. That's, I mean, it's something as simple as that, where you realize there's a shorthand. We might, you know, crack our friends up in America by referring to a tagline from a TV show we all saw and shared. And that would happen, you know, in other countries. You kind of feel outside of the joke, and you know, it can be really alienating. You know, I think that Grupp, the filmmaker here, is kind of taking something, you know, I'm a big believer in specificity in a story, kind of really unlocking a kind of universal response from us. And so he's taken something very, very specific here. You know, the world of professional or gymnastics, the Ukraine, where if I hadn't gone to Molodist, I don't think I would have even had a mental picture of what Ukraine is even like. And I think that's quite common for the West, even as this terrible, you know, new war has been going on over there. It's really abstract to a lot of us. And so he's taking all these things that are specific, but he's really identifying something that if we've ever moved in our life, certainly if we move to a foreign country, we can relate to. Let's talk about the style of the film, because I think, you know, this film has a really interesting approach. It doesn't feel, to me, I would liken it to documentary filmmaking, but of course it's all constructed, but in the way that the camera is handheld, you'll get jump cuts, and everything is meant to kind of look observational. So we're kind of immersed in the world. But I'm curious, does that work for you? Does that add something to it? Sometimes that can be off-putting, where it's less, you know, Spielberg is the opposite side, where everything is deliberate and everything is the perfect version of the shot. How did you guys feel about the style? I don't see any hands quite yet, but maybe we can weave that into the next question, which is the lead actor and quite a bit of the cast in this film are gymnasts. There's no other way you could do this movie. You know, it's you can have a gymnast act, but you can't really have an actor do a Jaeger, right? But then there are certain limitations, obviously, by choosing a gymnast. How did you feel specifically about that lead actor who, again, in that style we were talking about, we're kind of observing her. So it's not like he's written a lot of dramatic scenes for her to argue with people or things like that, but we're kind of eavesdropping on routines that are probably very similar to what this young woman does herself. Did you find her a compelling enough lead? Did she have kind of enough charisma for you to relate to her? All right. Any takers?
Looks like Renee's got her hand up.
Oh, great. Sorry. Go ahead, Renee.
I think that the way this movie is filmed and not being a documentary gives it a level of precision and authenticity that is very interesting to us as viewers. I think that the main character is, as an actual athlete, she does not have a lot of charisma. I think that was the word you just used. She doesn't. She's stone-faced, and this is what she does, and she wants to do it. She wants to do it really well. It's why she's in Switzerland. It's why she relinquishes her identity in Ukraine. But I think the filmmaking and the lighting, to answer your question, lends a feeling of a documentary, but more importantly, the feeling of authenticity of the story. And in addition to the addition of the way that the director deals with the technology, that I think really lends it that level of authenticity as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I think oftentimes the reason that a filmmaker will choose to sort of go for a documentary style is because they really want to convey the truth of what they're showing. They want it to be as believable and as relatable as possible. So they're kind of stripping away layers, even though it takes a kind of artifice to create that illusion as well. We'll come back in a moment to the technology, because within this kind of documentary style film, there are, of course, excerpts of the actual protests. But I want to hear from a couple more people. Jean, you've raised your hand, so tell us your thoughts. Just make sure to unmute. There you go.
So actually, this is Jim, but Paul. I would echo everything that was just said before, to the point that all the way through it, I was thinking, is she a gymnast who's acting, or an actor who somehow knew gymnastics? So I just find it it was only after watching the film I looked it up and found out what it was. That's all.
Yeah, no, and it's and it makes sense. I mean, you kind of want that to be unclear, I think, but certainly if it was the former, or if it was the actor who was performing these feats, this is the kind of thing that people win Oscars for, right? Whether it's Natalie Portman in Black Swan, that's a film that probably maybe this rhymes with in our memories, because there you have this kind of like monomaniacal focus by the lead character on what she wants to accomplish, and whether it's dancing, ballet, or it might be a character learning how to play the piano convincingly or something like that. But this is really, really physically demanding stuff, and it's not just the lead actor, but also the friends and the other teammates that they surround her with. I'd like to play in a moment, but I want to hear first from Maureen, just a few words from the director where he talks about why this was important to him. But go ahead, Maureen.
Yeah, thank you. I was looking.
It would go away if you touch the hand.
I think our hand's up again.
Okay.
Jim, I think you might want to mute just because I'm hearing something from, I think, your screen. Go ahead, Maureen.
Yeah, I was watching closely to make sure that there wasn't a double involved, that it was really her and her teammates when she was training. that it was really her, which was really astounding, that she was a fairly good actor in displaying her emotions and her feelings. The fact that it shifted to real footage of what was happening in Ukraine, um, it 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 sort of sent the message that she really couldn't grasp or really felt she was the activist that her girlfriend was. You know, it was really horrific. I mean, very what the Ukrainians were going through to oust this dictator. It was very, very, very telling, and yet she couldn't. All her focus was on the fact that she didn't have this relationship that she wanted with her mother. And the gymnastics, when she did go to train, I think it was in Switzerland. Am I wrong? I don't.
That's right. Yep.
That it wasn't pleasurable anymore. It became an obsession. And so it was interesting to see how she evolved from leaving Ukraine and having her friendships and her friends, leaving to this country where she was always under suspicion. She couldn't connect with her teammates. Her teammates didn't want to really connect with her. So there was always this back and forth, what she had to go through, and this her gymnastics wasn't pleasurable anymore. I thought it was more of an obsession than anything else, to fill that void that she missed from her friends that she left behind, and what she felt was a lack of interest from her mother. You know, she couldn't appreciate what her mother was doing in trying to, you know, document what was happening. So there was a lot of she was very conflicted, and a lot
Yeah.
of anger. I saw a lot of anger in her. So uh, I saw that whole scene as I was watching it evolve, how she became almost self-destructive.
Yeah,
She
she
was
does.
so obsessed, she was so self-destructive that, you know, I think it went beyond her gymnastic capabilities. It had to, it was more than that. So
No,
towards the end.
there are a lot of really insightful observations in what you just said, and I want to kind of come back to them and unpack them over the next half hour as we kind of get into a little bit more. But let me just share about a minute in which, in another conversation around the release of the film with the Alliance Française, the director, so you'll kind of get an image of, he's a very young man, you know, you'll get an image of kind of what he looks like, but also how he talks about the casting of these gymnasts. And I think he has a very modern, you might even call it woke take on why that is. So let me just play this for you. I hope I can get this to work.
I think I had to start by knowing that I was not a Ukrainian gymnast myself, and that on doing Olga, I was also going to work with people who can be above my own experience, and it was almost like a documentary research for me to write the film. And this was the case for the Ukrainian subject, but it was also the case for the gymnast subject. And you know, for example, the Swiss team, some of the girls were in the real Swiss team at that time, and the coaches are the real coaches of the national team. And Anastasia Budyashkina, who plays Olga, she was also a real Ukrainian athlete. And for me, it was important to know that I had to meet them very early in the process, so that I can approach this experience and not be only from an external point of view, which is mine.
All right, so that's just him sort of confirming just the degree to which he's built this ensemble out of professional gymnasts. But I think it's also really interesting to hear. This is a moment, I think, in storytelling history, you might say, when storytellers are really questioning their right to tell certain stories. And I appreciate his thoughtfulness in this, but of course, I also think as a film critic, I believe in everybody's right, to every actor can play any role. Sometimes that can really, really backfire if they do it in an insensitive way. But I kind of love hearing that behind what he's saying, I think, is you also hear that there's a collaborative quality in the way that he made this film. And so everything from the body language, the way gymnasts walk, instead of a director kind of coming in and say, I went to music school, I know a little bit about filmmaking, but this is how you gymnasts need to walk. He's really trusting his collaborators. And he's even said that, the ending of the film is kind of informed by, is workshopped in a way with his lead actor or lead actress. Let's talk about some of the other things that were kind of coming up in what Maureen said. For instance, I think one takeaway question from this film is, what does the Jaeger represent? We see that move kind of introduced in practically the first scene. It's the second scene. They're out playing soccer. Then she's talking with her coach about how the Jaeger will be the thing that gets her noticed in the Euro Championship for the Ukrainian team, right? And that's the direction her life is going until it's quite literally derailed by that astonishing scene, where we're getting the relationship between her and her mother kind of established, and then they're rammed. For a gymnast, this could be something that could be career-ending at the age of 15. Can you imagine? And so we really understand early on the stakes, why she needs to be out of Ukraine, why I believe she does support what her mother's doing, but her own priorities, her own kind of fixation on what she wants to do with her life is directly jeopardized by that. And this is, something that she's kind of obliged to do. So as we return to the Jaeger throughout, we see her increasingly do this move. Let me hear from you kind of what you think is going on with that, because I think that clearly represents something, not more of a feeling or more of like kind of what the character is going through, but whether or not you found yourself phrasing the question, I'm sure you saw it coming through and were kind of unpacking it a little bit yourselves as you watched the movie. Would anyone like to weigh in? All answers are welcome. One thing I can add, don't be shy, but the one thing I can add is, if this were a traditional sports movie, that way that special move, the Jaeger, is kind of brought in and returned to, would set up a certain kind of ending, right? The ending where she performs it for the first time successfully and accolades rain down on her and everything is happily ever after. That is not the way that move pays off here. What do you think that means within the context of the story?
Susan, I saw you nodding along and smiling. Did you have any particular thoughts about this one?
Just unmute before speaking.
Yeah. I can't figure out where the hand is. I always know it, but I don't see it. So I was going to.
You can always do it manually too.
Yeah. Okay. I honestly haven't thought about that question, so it wasn't exactly what I was going to answer. But I think it's a fabulous question because, it represents to her, I guess, an achievement at a certain level, that she really belongs there somehow, that she really is that level of a gymnast, and that she can, go to the Olympics, which is the hint that we saw towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know necessarily that I think she was angry all the time, though I appreciate Maureen's perspective. But I think she was, I mean, I kind of think you have to be obsessed to be an athlete at that level. And I think that reaching that pinnacle of being able to do that move, Jaeger, kind of maybe in her mind elevated her to a level where she was, kind of accepted and equal. I also think, just to add to what we were saying before, that she became more accepted by the team as she began to have friends at the team. Her French got much better.
Mhm.
So I think it's part of that development of what we were talking about before, both the language and that it takes time. It's such a competitive scene, being on a team like that, and it takes time to not only be competitive but also be a team together.
That's a really
And
good
finally,
point.
yeah,
Go ahead.
thank you. And finally, I just wanted to say I was actually surprised and struck by the kindness of the coach, the Swiss coach, and some of the other people who really, reminded us that she was 15. She was just a kid. And they
Mhm.
really, it's not the image that we sometimes have of these, sort of abusive coaches who are just out to win at all costs. And so I thought personally that he was pretty sensitive, and some of the other people that took care of her at different times were pretty sensitive to what she was going through, obviously.
Yeah, it's interesting that she is being pushed to do the Jaeger by her Ukrainian coach, but the Swiss
Right.
coach really is concerned for her and
Right.
doesn't want her to risk it, because it's clearly something where you can get badly injured if it goes wrongly. But I loved what you said about the team, because I think that is a theme or something that we could kind of extrapolate here in the film. In a way, the two teams, the Swiss team and the Ukrainian team, represent the two nationalities, the two parents. Which one is she in allegiance with? Which coach is she listening to? She's in Switzerland, but she's still thinking like, she hears, in a way you can imagine her hearing the voice of the Ukrainian coach. She's still communicating by these kind of technologies, right, with her friends and her mother back home. And of course, it all kind of comes to a dramatic head, I think, at the Euro Championship, where you expect maybe the Ukrainian, her old Ukrainian friend is going to do something exceptional, and instead she takes the moment to make a stand. And the way they're pulling her back, and so when it comes time to do the move that we are fully expecting her to do, she doesn't, right? And it's so interesting to me when a filmmaker is able to communicate the absence of something, right? It's easy to show us something, but how do you get us to recognize when something that we expect to see there isn't there, and what does that mean? And in this case, I think we expect that to build up to the big move, and it means everything about the psychology that she's going through, that this thing that she's dedicated the movie until then to perfecting, she chooses not to do, in a way. But does anyone else? Maureen, go ahead.
Unless I'm wrong, correct me if I am, I thought she did perfect at one time the Jaeger. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. It's not that she never does it. Right. Yeah.
At one time, and they also her relationship with her teammates, she was true to herself. She didn't push her friendships, but it was the turning point, I think, was when she was helping her other teammates at early in the morning or whatever to perfect their moves on her own volition. And she cared. It showed that one side of her. She wasn't a demonstrative, warm and fuzzy person, but she was enabling her other teammates There were certain scenes where she was helping a teammate perfect a certain move that she couldn't, and she was trying to encourage her. And I think the acceptance was extremely gradual, but they realized that there was that human side of her. The other thing I saw is that when her mother was brutally attacked during a certain, she was there in the midst of the riots, and her mother was brutally attacked and was hospitalized. And I think at that point, I think she saw her mother as a different light, where she really, really showed for the first time, she really cared about her mother. There was always that tension, you know, mother and daughter relation. You don't care about me. You don't care what I do. And the mother says, well, I have a job to do. And it was at that point where I saw that there was this real love and concern she had for her mother. And if her mother can sort of survive that brutal attack, my own opinion, when she accomplished that Jaeger, I think it was an affirmation that she could achieve something on her own. And that's when she decided to leave it. She proved something to herself, that, and it wasn't so much for anybody else, but it was to herself, that she could actually accomplish something. And at that point, when I saw her trying to redo it and do it, and against the doctor's advice and her coach, you need to rest, you can't do it. I think at that point, she was happy with that one accomplishment, and she was ready to say, I did what I did for myself. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. And then we get to the end of the movie, which I don't want to go any further. But I think it was sort of like a self-affirmation, that she could do things that she could be proud of, just as much as her mother was determined to do things that were proud for the country, for herself.
I think that's a really interesting reading, and I think you're right to sort of recognize that distinction between sort of repeating and doing that move, because practice is always about getting ready to sort of be able to do it on the stage, but the idea that perhaps achieving that is enough, because going back to this idea of teams, you know, that you know, Susan kind of brought up here, you have her really focused on her own standing out, you know, and advancing, but not only is she torn, but in that moment where she sees her Ukrainian friends, you know, protesting at the match, whether to sort of join them, but later on there's a question of kind of in a way, is the team that she identifies with really the country of Ukraine? So it's like she's made this achievement that she can probably look to, and then she can go back to the life that she had left behind, and that's kind of where we see her at the end. Now, the ending is the ending, that's the epilogue, but tell me what you all think of kind of the climax, where we see her doing the Jaeger again, but in an incredibly self-destructive way. You know, this could be as simple as a, did you like that ending? Did you buy it? Did you, you know, did it work for you? Because I think that we're so invested in the character at this point. It's really hurtful to see her, you know, kind of sabotaging herself in this way. How did you react to it when you saw the film?
I thought that she did it on purpose.
Sure, exactly.
She wanted to go back to Ukraine. So that was the way of doing it. And it was really painful to see her doing this. And my neighbor's dog must have sensed something, because, you know, he started to bark. And but I think that she did it on purpose. I mean, she wanted to say, this is it, I'm done, and I want to go back. Because the fact of, you know, it's kind of interesting when they are all together, you know, the friend, she's there, and of course the team is there also, but also the Ukrainian coach is there also. you know, in the Europe, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
They all get together. And I think that, you know, it's too hard for her knowing what's going on with her mom and what's going on to her country. So she wants to go back. I took it like, you know, she did it on purpose.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. I think that the film is clear about that. Although I found myself a little frustrated by the ending because I don't know if it's the only way she could have gotten back. So it seems like she's doing more than just sending herself home, but she's almost literally crippling her the thing that she spent the whole rest of the movie pursuing, you know.
Well, maybe this is over for me. I don't want to do it anymore.
Right.
And
she's
that's
making
why
it
she started to
irreversible.
coach, you know, kids instead.
Right.
Yeah.
But other people reaction. Go ahead, Dominique. I'd like to hear what you thought. Just unmute, please.
It is really an impossible choice for a 15-year-old between her vocation and her mother and country. And it also, I think, her hurting herself purposely is also symbolic of what is happening to her, that she's really giving up something profound. It's not really fair for a girl that age and talent to have to make that kind of a choice.
Yeah, good point. Anyone else care to comment on the ending? One of the great things about a group like this is when we've all seen the movie, we can talk about the ending. As a film critic, this whole idea of spoilers means, I have to talk about a movie with one hand tied behind my back. But I love hearing how people react to the way a film resolves. Go ahead, Lee.
I have not had a chance to see the entire movie, but I do want to make the comment that I already was thinking of Simone Biles, the upcoming Olympics, the fact that she had the twisties and the mental health issues, and part of it was I'm from Michigan, and we had that gymnastics physician who's jailed for life, and just all those themes just jumped in my head about the film. And so I look forward to the ending, but I think I have the Olympics and the pressures and the tensions. I was just at the Olympic swim trials in Indianapolis a few weeks ago. Mental health, psyching yourself up and out were themes. So it's the universality of it hits me at the same time as how unique her own story is.
Yeah, that's true. Maureen, would you like to? In a moment, we'll shift gears to sort of wrap on the Ukraine of it all, but I'd like to make sure we leave time for that. But Maureen, tell us your thoughts.
Okay, just the last thing I wanted to add is that I think she competed against herself, not with other teams. It was very self-gratifying for her in her own accomplishment that she had finally reached her own agency. And what I thought was very telling during the whole movie at the end was the only time she smiled. The only time I saw she really enjoyed helping these children, these young children at the very end, these 5- and 6-year-olds doing their gymnastics and her being the teacher. And she seemed so sad and so conflicted throughout the movie that it wasn't only at the end that I think she found her true self, where she really enjoyed what she was doing. I just don't think the pressure to achieve, I think it was something she did for herself. And I think she accomplished that for herself. And that's why she decided to hang it up. She reached her own self-gratification. And it was very touching to see her enjoy helping other children do what she did. Maybe she saw herself as a young child when, she could relate. I thought that nice. That was the only time her face lit up. She had a smile. She was glowing, which I didn't see pretty much throughout the movie. She was.
You're right.
very-
I think it's important that we see that, because otherwise this ending could seem like a tragic ending, but rather I think we see that it all worked out for the best for her, and she's a much more satisfied person in that last little epilogue. Now, to me, it's really just this kind of kismet that this movie was being made at a time, this movie was made in the pandemic. It's only a few short years ago. Remember just what that all meant, just all the extra restrictions that this would have put on the filmmakers and to be able to just pull it off logistically, because there's a bubble required. There's all bringing these people together. But the timing, coincides. This movie, premiered just a few months after the invasion of Ukraine. What did it sort of unlock in you in terms of just did it help understand in any way kind of what's going on in that corner of the world? I don't know if any of you have ties to Ukrainian people. But I think one of the things that's tricky about Ukraine is it's a country that not a lot of us necessarily do have connections to, and therefore it can be very easy to kind of depersonalize. So this movie offers a chance, I think, at exactly the moment when the world is kind of looking again to Ukraine and needing to kind of feel some connection, a way to identify with someone going through kind of a lesser degree of almost all the people I met at Molodist who were in their 20s fled the country, even though they're doing all these, kind of the draft and all this kind of stuff. They to protect their lives, they ran off to Berlin, to London, any place they could. So versions of what Olga is doing here too. But how did the movie sort of land with you in terms of where it fits in world events? It takes place basically 8 years before the invasion, but it reminds us that this has kind of been an ongoing struggle for this corner of the world. Does anyone who watched it have a connection of any kind to Ukraine? People you've been in touch with or anything along those lines? Even that to me is kind of telling. Before I went to that festival, I myself didn't realize. I think I had a student who was from Ukraine, but I didn't really think about just kind of how complex the challenge was. Go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, just the same thing. I mean, I've run into people over the years, whether it's a young student who came to us, who were like his teachers and said, can you help because my family is still in Ukraine and I'm here on this scholarship or something. He was like 10 years old. And, can you help my sister who's in Ukraine and she wants to leave? And I've met a number of people in France who are expatriates, I guess you could say, from Ukraine. And, there's always a kind of a sad story about just like this movie, the difference between where we are and where we came from and where our heart belongs and where we are practically. But, Ukraine has I don't know anything about it. And I know little about it, I should say. So just this whole idea of the revolution and what was happening before, which was horrible, and what happened after. And, I'm a huge supporter of Ukraine now, but, Ukraine has a kind of a mixed bag of a history. And it's interesting to start to unpack that a little bit. I mean, I just picking that one year of that revolution really taught me something, but I really need to know much more about it to be
well, I think those images that we'd seen, like of the Euromaidan,
Yeah.
you know, they make it look in a way like, I don't know, things that we saw out of Sarajevo and you know, other
Yeah.
conflict times. What
Yeah.
I found having gone there in 2019 was the idea that this city is every bit as rich and vibrant and modern and European in so many of its qualities as any of the cities I've visited in Europe. And I think the movie does kind of communicate that there's a way in which when these kind of conflicts go on, it's easy to kind of imagine that there's something more primitive or you know, backwards about a place, and that's not at all the case there. I mean, it's and we see, I think, by identifying with this young woman, ideally, if he's successful as in the film, you know, we recognize ourselves in her, or it resonates. You know, going back to that first question of kind of ways in which her experience sort of brings up things that we might have lived ourselves back in the past, and makes that connection. Because I really do think I was surprised maybe how directly I connected with the people around me there in a country I really didn't have much of a mental image of. And now when you see the images, it's like seeing Syria. I mean, everything's just been blown to bits. It's really a real tragedy, I think, that this culturally rich country, you know, has been just kind of stomped the way that it has, for lack of a better word. I'm going to play it very quickly, just a few words from the director, and then we're going to kind of wrap up. But the director here is kind of talking. This next clip is from something he did kind of as a promotional bit for the movie when it was released, but it's just talking, I think, about how in that kind of way that the world ended up catching up to what he was doing in the film, it sort of made the film more political maybe than he'd intended. And here's how he describes that.
The character is not only realizing that a political event is going on very far away from where she is. It's also a character who realizes that politics is everywhere, and that she won't escape politics, because sports is politics. Everything is political, and I think that artists maybe should realize that too. That art is very, very politic, and you cannot escape this scale of your of art.
All right. Well, I'm going to hand the parole over to Justine to wrap us up today. Thank you all for engaging in this conversation with me, and I look forward to next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You were very, very discerning and marvelous. I enjoyed this.
Go ahead, Justine.
So thank you indeed, Peter, and thanks also to Renee Ketchum, Melissa Sora, and Isabelle Leroux with the Alliance Française. And thank you to everyone who joined us today and for sharing your experiences and your insights. I wanted to put a link in the chat, I'm doing it right now, to a film called Klondike that might be of interest to you if you're looking for movies about Ukraine. This was a movie that came out at roughly the same time as the one that we watched for today, but that actually it really benefited from the timing. It had an amazing festival run, and was critically quite well received, whereas this one sort of had a little bit of a softer landing. So that's a film that I would recommend to you. I also wanted to just mention that next month's French Cinémathèque is going to take place on the 26th of August. As I said, we'll be discussing Summer of '85 by Francois Ozon. Putting a link to that in the chat as well as a short film of his called A Summer Dress, which is also streaming. And we'll be sending more information out about all of that soon. In the meanwhile, we look forward to seeing all of you in August. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next month.